Hey friends. So I have this weird thing happening that I really thought I made this video and I can't find it. And I also have like a whole slide presentation that I know I made and used and I can't find that either. So that's interesting. This is on the topic of radical acceptance. So I am going to radically accept that all of the radical acceptance stuff has gone missing and I'm just going to make another one. Um, so, anyways, I've been wanting to talk about radical acceptance more because as I support people in supporting their nervous system, they often are going from a functional freeze, a long-term chronic semi-dissociated state, in that freeze response or fawn response as well can come in there. As they transition and get more connected with their nervous system and their nervous system becomes more flexible, it's going to start to mobilize up and into sympathetic, which is more of the fight flight, because the nervous system has like a gravitational pull towards ventral. And the way it works is it goes from dorsal, that freeze response, into sympathetic, which is that fight flight response, and into ventral, which is the calm and connected. So people are experiencing more sympathetic and more mobilization, and it comes out as anger or irritation or anxiety because most of us have only had those models for experiencing the sympathetic state, and it can feel really uncomfortable and disorienting and not safe. And so, what we want to bring online is more effective mobilization strategies. And what I'm realizing is that when people start to think about assertive communication, they can tend to get scared and be back in that defensive state. And you can't communicate assertively when you're feeling defensive. So, why is that? So, assertive communication requires you to have no enemy. Okay. So, if I have an enemy, then I'm automatically in that defense state. And I'm going to need to use aggressive or passive aggressive communication because I think there's something to lose and I think there's something to fight against. Okay. So if I'm in assertive communication, then I don't have an enemy. I'm like, I have nothing to protect. I'm just going to be clear with what I need or want. And I'm going to be okay with the fact that I may not get it. Okay. So there's this quote by Melanie Tonia Evans, who's a teacher that I really like. And she says, let me pull it up. Okay. Um, Hold on. So life and people are not always going to be perfect, and it is incredibly immature to think they will. So most of the world is operating off of this like victim villain savior idea. Okay, I really feel like I made this video. So if you have watched this video before, please tell me what it's called so I can find it. Okay, so most of the world is operating off of victim villain savior. And that requires in every challenging situation for there to be someone who's the bad guy, someone who's the good guy, and someone who's like being victimized. Okay. And in that construct, we have to see things as right or wrong. Okay. So something challenging happens and we're like, oh, that's bad, or I'm bad, or they're bad. Okay. Somebody is bad, something is bad. And then automatically I'm in the defense state, no chance of assertive communication. So radical acceptance gives us the opportunity not to accept what's happened in terms of like approving of it, but to just acknowledge that something has happened. I would prefer if it was called radical acknowledgement, because I think sometimes people feel like acceptance means they have to say it's okay. So let's say, for example, I'm divorced. Okay. That happened. My kid has two houses. Do I think it was like the best thing for my kid or for me? I don't know. Um, did I spend a lot of time feeling like it was the worst thing and that I like fucked up everybody's lives? Yeah. And what radical acceptance gives us the opportunity to do is to be like, all right, the dominoes have fallen the way they have fallen, and now we are where we are. So you're not saying, I approve of it. You're not saying it's acceptable. You're saying it happened. I acknowledge that it happened. And I acknowledge as a mature adult that I cannot change the past and that there's no like nothing to be won or no benefit in trying to change the past or regret the past. Okay. So you're saying the dominoes have fallen. The way the dominoes fell, it makes sense that we are where we are. You know, I had a lack of skills in terms of interpersonal effectiveness. I had a lot of unresolved trauma, and I ended up in a relationship conflict. That makes sense, right? That makes sense given my personal history. I really like how DBT doesn't see people as like mentally ill. It just says you have a skill deficit, which is my favorite thing. It's like, okay, if I'm not a great soccer player and I haven't learned soccer, then that makes sense. If I'm not great at relationships and I haven't learned how to have relationships, then that makes sense. So you're just sort of saying, according to how everything shook out, this makes sense. I acknowledge that it happened. I'm no longer trying to change it. And then once we're there, we get to say, okay, given where we are, what do we want to do? So it's like a poker game, right? You've been given your cards and you're not going to be like, I don't like these cards, I don't want to play. Right? Maybe some people are, right? But for us, every day in every moment we get to be like, okay, these are my cards. Excuse me. These are my cards. This is what I'm playing with. What am I going to do with these cards? They could be like a real shitty set of cards. So I could decide, like, I'm going to bluff, I'm going to fold, I'm going to, try to switch my cards out. I don't really know poker that well. Okay, so we have choices and we have autonomy with what to do with those cards. We just can't necessarily change the cards. Okay. So when I'm facing a life situation, I'm going to use radical acceptance to be like, it is what it is. This is what's happening right now. I'm not gonna I'm gonna support myself if I'm doing a lot of like, it's not fair. I don't want to be it this way. This person was bad for doing this. If I find myself being in the victim, villain, savior, playing any of those roles, I'm gonna offer myself a reminder that, like, okay, I would like to do the adult version of this, which is creator, challenger. This is the empowerment dynamic. They call it coach. I like to call it collaborator. So I'm going to face the situation as either the creator. I'm going to be like, all right, I've been given these cards. What can I make out of them? The challenger, I'm going to be like, okay, this person needs me to be the bad guy right now, and I am creating this challenge for them, and I'm going to accept that that's who I am in this. Or the collaborator. I'm going to be like, hey, can I collaborate with you to support you at all? I'm not saving anybody. I'm just offering my collaboration. I don't love coach because it still has a hierarchical aspect to it. And I'm really more and more just want to be on the mutual aid front. Okay, so how does this open us up for assertive communication? It allows us to be in our frontal lobe. If I'm like, hey, this is a challenger and I'm going to create something out of it, then there's nothing to defend against, right? So I don't have to be down here. So I can be up in my frontal lobe. I can see possibilities. I can see choices, and I can communicate my choices from the I have nothing to lose. So let's say I'm in a scenario and someone is like, you have to pay, $5,000 for this thing that went wrong with your house. And I'm like, it was really your fault, right? But I'm like, okay, this is a challenge. I have some choices. I can try to get a lawyer and see if there's any possibilities for me to, be supported through the situation in a different way. I can say, all right, I'll pay the $5,000. I just want the thing to be fixed. I can try to connect with the person and see if we can work something out. And I'm doing all of that from the standpoint of, if I'm going to throw out some ideas of what would be like my first choices, and if not that, something better. This is a phrase that I learned from Quasi Joe here that is really helping me a lot lately, is I'm just doing a ton of, if not that, something better. So if I have an idea of like, oh, I think it would be best if my kid had this play date and then came home for dinner. And so I'm going to say to myself, like, either that, or something better. And then if the other parent is like, oh, turns out we can't do the play date, or it's like, oh, can he stay for dinner here? I can be like, oh yeah, that must be the something better. And this requires faith, right? Faith for me is not a religious or a God thing. It's more of a there is something at work in the universe that is a guiding principle for everything. It's the thing that makes sure that the moon doesn't crash into us. It's the thing that makes sure that we're like the exact different distance from the sun to not burn or freeze. It's the thing that tells the spiders like when to wake up and how to make webs in perfect geometrical patterns. It's the thing that like made the dandelions the perfect like aerodynamic ability to send their little seedlings all over the thing. Like there is something at work that is like an organizing force in the universe. And I have faith in that if it can take care of the dandelions, then and the moon and the sun, then like more than likely it can take care of these details of my one lifetime. Knowing that like whatever is the thing that happens was the best option. So Quasi calls this the path of least resistance. So it's like wherever, however things shake out, that was the easiest or best choice on a universal level. So, like, if I get in a car accident one day, let's say the universe was like, we have three options. We could have Gazihaya get in a car accident, or we could have Gazihaya like have smooth sailing and somebody else gets in a car accident, or we could have Gazihaya like, I don't know, get somewhere early and that means someone else like ripple effect gets cancer. Okay. And of the three options, like in the me get in a car accident is the only one that somebody doesn't die. Okay. So they're like, that's the best choice. So they're going to go with me getting in the car accident because it was save this other person who would have died in the car accident and this other person that would have died of cancer. Okay. That's a little bit of a wonky example, but it's all of that to say that like if we knew, let's say for example, if I knew that if I hadn't gotten a divorce, like my kid would have gotten very sick when he was 3 years old or something, which one would I choose? And it's like, oh, that makes it obvious. But because we think that there's a way, we have this mythology, this fantasy that there's a way for nothing to ever go wrong. We're like not willing for things to go wrong. And we either blame everybody else or blame ourselves when things go wrong. But if we had this faith that like the sun is exactly where it's meant to be and we can trust that, we don't wake up in the morning and think like, is the sun going to come too close today? Right? We're like, oh yeah, the sun's not going to come too close. The sun's right where it needs to be. If we saw every situation in our lives as that, like, okay, like my favorite cup broke because my kid dropped it. And I was like, okay, well, like I was disappointed for a minute, but then I was like, must be something better. And then I found this cup, which is like way cooler to me and has this like really good texture that helps me a lot sensory wise that I can have like all day. And I love it and has a rainbow straw and this sticker that I love like fits perfectly on it. So like it really was something better. Like if not this, then something better really does start to play out. And when it feels like it's not a good thing, you can go back to that and just be like, yeah, something worse would have happened if this didn't happen. So I'm glad this happened because I don't even want to think about what it was that was gonna happen, you know? Um, Okay, so those are all my ideas on assertive communication. And assertive communication, I know I didn't talk as much about assertive communication, but a lot of people think about assertive communication that you're like telling other people what you need them to do. That is not assertive communication. Assertive communication is taking total self responsibility for the situation. So if somebody spits in my face, I can say, you know, I'd appreciate it if you don't spit in my face, or please stop. I don't like that. Right. It is fine to say that, and they don't have to do anything about it. If they decide to keep spitting in my face, it is totally my responsibility to not keep standing there getting spitted on, going, you shouldn't be spitting on me, and why are you spitting on me? And please stop spitting on me. And look, they're spitting on me, right? It's my responsibility to just say, oh, I think I'm going to take 3 steps back. Or like, oh, I think I'm going to go ahead and not hang out with you next week as I planned. Or I think I'm going to like wear one of those visor things that we had in COVID so that your spit doesn't get on me. Like, or I could say like, oh, maybe I'm okay with the spit and change my mind, right? Like I have so many options. None of them are about changing you. So we're never trying to change people, places, or things, circumstances. We're taking responsibility for changing our relationship with them. Okay. So let's say somebody is actually physically harming me and they continually do so. It is my responsibility to go ahead and like get a restraining order, right? Or go ahead and seek out the support of a domestic violence shelter, things like that. So it's not inaction, it's not acceptance and staying in the dangerous situation. It's taking full responsibility for it. And as a person who got a lot of support from public resources when I needed them, it is challenging, but it is possible, right? And I'm not minimizing how there are circumstances where people don't have the ability to make choices to take care of themselves in domestic violence situations or in, you know, incarceration or um, genocide, war, all of those things, right? And in those situations, the radical like self-responsibility is mindset, right? So I'm reading The Choice right now, which is a really beautiful book about a woman who survived the Holocaust and was in Auschwitz. And um, her mindset, her perspective was what was in her control. And that's where she took that assertive stance and saying like, okay, this is what's happening and this is how I'm going to move through it with self-responsibility. For her, she really was determined to survive it. For others, they made the choice to end their life, right? So it's not about a certain option. It's about taking the responsibility and releasing the blame and trying to stop or control others. I've talked a little bit longer than I expected to. I'm just going to say this one last thing. So the serenity prayer is something that I was really confused by early on when I first was involved in 12 steps. It says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I thought that if I was more courageous, I could change more people, places, and things. But what that prayer really means is the serenity to accept the things I cannot change is all of the people, places, and things. I cannot change the people, places, and things. The courage to change the things I can, me and my perspective, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it's like, I wish that it didn't say the wisdom to know the difference, but it just said, accept the people, places, and things that I cannot change and the courage to change myself, because then we wouldn't get so confused about it. But you know, bring the wisdom is the like asking your higher wisdom or God, whatever it is that you relate to for that experience, saying, is this me or is this people, places, and things? People, places, and things, I'm gonna let them do their thing and I'm gonna take total self-responsibility about how I interact with them. Acknowledging that as an adult, like life and people are not always going to be perfect. And it is, you know, it's a little judgy to say it's immature to think they will, but we can say like we do know that that's the case, is that there are going to be things that fall into the category of, you know, not our first choice for the rest of our life. And if we spend our life waiting for all of the loose ends to get tied and for everything to work out, and we keep trying to work everything out, um, that's going to be a really exhausting, frustrating life in a chronic fight, flight, or freeze or fawn. And yeah, for when we're there, we're there. But if we don't want to be there, then these are some options for how to support ourselves. Okay. Love you, love you, love you. See you soon.